the secondary suite issue, are you anticipating that there will be any moves between now and the election that may change the process, or do you have suggestions that you may make yourself?
I have many suggestions, which I have been pushing forth with Council for some time. I think it's fair to say that Council is at the height of its frustration with our terribly broken system. So the real question really is for Council members. It's for the members of Council to say, are you willing to fix this now, or do you want to throw this over the fence and get someone else to fix it? I certainly think that there are solutions possible, that there are solutions within reach, but it really is up to Council on whether or not they want to take those solutions. I mean, if I were giving political advice, I would say take it off the table. Let's get it done before the election, but that's really up to Council.
There are only so many meetings left before the election.
Indeed, there are. Three.
We haven't heard of these ideas yet.
Indeed.
So might you, I don't know if this is an intemperate question, would you make a suggestion during the election campaign of what you'd like to see happen?
Well, I mean, there's nothing new for me. I've always been the one willing to compromise on this, to listen to what councillors are saying. I've always been on the side of reform, even if they're tentative, halting steps towards reform. We got to get better. And so if council members have something, either if they've changed their minds on the last one that was delivered to council, which I believe failed on an 8-7 vote, or if they have ideas that would make that one more palatable or something new, I'd be very happy to hear those ideas.
So do you sit and wait for someone else to bring notice of motion or some sort of reform forward?
It's very clear that council is not willing to take my leadership on this and would prefer an idea to come from council members, which is fine, that's their prerogative. But of course, I'm not just sitting and waiting. I am certainly working with people to help them think about what solutions may make sense.
Does it just take a new group around the table?
I think this group is smart. I think they've got the experience. I think they know. I think all of them but one agree that the system doesn't work. And with that wealth of experience, I'd like to see if they have an idea on how to move forward.
What do you take from the fact that virtually every vote comes out different, the ones where there's a recorded vote?
On the secondary suites? You know, there's been a lot of work done on what is the rationale for this. And there are some councillors who it's very clear that they don't like ones with back lanes, for example, or without back lanes, I mean. Or perhaps that if there is greater than X amount of neighborhood opposition, then they get irritated about it. But even this last one was kind of interesting. Very little community opposition, just one family complaining, and you still had a couple voting against it. The one before that was a vote that I didn't really understand. So I've sort of given up on understanding. And I certainly base my votes on the planning merits, as well as on city policy, and I'm sure that other members of council do the same on their interpretation.
I just had a question about the letter that went to members of council from the Integrity Commissioner,
Yes.
the one that you mentioned this morning. I guess, is it concerning to you that after Pincot's complaint, there was 4 more specifically about behaviour in council chambers?
I think that the Integrity Commissioner has raised a valid point, which is in the 7 years that I've been in this chair, we have probably only had questions of privilege raised by council members in council a handful of times. I can probably count on one hand. But that is a tool that is available. I can't see everything that's going on in chambers, but if a member feels that they're being intimidated or harassed, or other members are not showing respect and decorum to the process, and if I don't see it, then it is correct that the Integrity Commissioner is saying that that should be dealt with within the council meeting. I am concerned that we are starting to see patterns of behavior, maybe even erratic behavior, from some members of council as they relate to the others. And we got to set all of that aside. I don't care if there's an election coming. We've got to set all of it aside. We're still in this job, and we've got to continue to do the best job we can for citizens.
What do you mean by erratic behaviour or patterns of behaviour? Just want
Well,
to
like the things you're talking about, right? I haven't seen all those complaints, but people have been telling me, look, you know, this council member is spending his or her time sending text messages about other council members, for example, or, you know, I feel like this council member is always staring me down when I'm trying to speak in council. So they seem like very minor things, and they are in many ways minor, but it also speaks to the fact that everyone's watching. And we have to not only do a good job for citizens, we have to be seen to be doing a good job and a professional job for citizens.
thought this was a fairly tough business. Somebody's staring at me, somebody's texting.
I mean, it's silly, right? In some ways, it's very silly, but it all comes down to the fact that when we're sitting in that room, we have to pay our full attention to what is before us because we're making really important decisions for the future of the community. And I think it's important that we are focused on that and that we're making our decisions based on the merits of what's before us, not who's in favor of it or who's moving it or who's against it or whose notice of motion it is.
Do you agree with the Integrity Commissioner's conclusion that if it happens in that room, it should be dealt with in that room, not go running to the Integrity Commissioner to complain?
You know, it's his point of view. I think he exists to look at all breaches of code of conduct. So if you had something really, really egregious happening in the room, it probably would be his spot to talk about it. I think what he was suggesting, the way I read it, was that if there are minor violations of privilege or of keeping the meeting going, then it's the chair's job to fix it. But again, if I don't see it, then they have to raise a question of privilege.
And this example that he examined as a result of this complaint from Councillor Pincott, this came about after the fact.
Yes.
So it wasn't in the moment. So
That's right. I didn't see it in the moment myself.
So do you think that that should have been dealt with, at the next available opportunity, bring it up as a point of privilege to you in the room?
Could have been. Points of privilege are meant to be at the moment, but certainly I'm flexible in thinking about how to do things like that. And in fact, I think the Integrity Commissioner's guidance in this way is actually very helpful.
Can I ask you about the Prime Minister's mistaken...
Really?
Yes, I just wanted to get your thoughts about what impact. It seems like it's now going to run for a couple of days. It's not
Really?
going away, it seems.
Really?
What do you think?
I am not a particularly delicate human being. And certainly there are things with the federal government that I can disagree with them on policy, and I can heartily argue with them about what would be better for Alberta. Making a flub in a speech? Come on. Are we that fragile as Albertans that we really think this is part of a vast conspiracy theory against the province? Or are we so sensitive that we are crying that we weren't listed next to Yukon? This is just silly. And frankly, those who are trying to make political hay out of it, there are big issues we should be working on in this province, and I would much rather they focus on that than on a perceived gaffe. I make mistakes all the time. I screw up speeches all the time. And usually people are kind enough to forgive and focus on the content of what I'm doing.
So is the outrage faux and they're just using the cudgel that's been handed there?
Let's talk about real issues. Let's get transit funded. Let's get wastewater and water services across the whole country done properly. Let's build the infrastructure we need. Let's make sure that we have access to Canadian energy to world markets. And let's not worry about perceived insults on a beautiful day.